Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Tim Ballard podcast. So excited to have one of my best friends here, someone who's been with us from almost day one when we launched into our rescue operations, whether it's OUR, the Nazarene Fund. He has his own amazing organization called Lava that we work with, and he is the Attorney General of the state of Utah. And Sean Reyes, thank you for being here.
Of course, brother.
And also, Sean's an executive producer of The Sound of Freedom, which is, as you know, is wow, like the numbers are insane.
Unbelievable.
And one reason we want you to come in right now, because I hope to have you on many times, is you were there. And let me set this up. This is one of our very first operations, and we knew that, man, we only have one or two shots at this. If we screw it up, like we'll lose forever. Like we'll never get back on track. So, you know, Sean can tell you the story, but you know, Sean showed up once when we were in the very beginning, and he was so willing to help. You're so willing to volunteer and just get your hands dirty. And I thought this would be great to bring you on ops to consult us. I mean, you're the highest ranking official in one of the states in the USA, and man, like guide us. Make sure we don't do something stupid that's going to set some horrible precedent and not allow us to work further. So, but anyway, so you've watched The Sound of Freedom, and you know how realistic that scene is, like on the island, right? Yeah. So just go ahead and just jump in. And what's your experience with us, and what was your thoughts on the island?
I'll say I've watched every iteration of it, from the raw footage one that was like 6 hours long down to every cut, and I think it's a masterpiece now. And kudos not only to you, Tim, for leading this and creating the opportunity to have a movie called The Sound of Freedom, but our other brothers who are involved. Of course, Jim Caviezel, who is, I think, one of the greatest actors that we have in our generation, but Alejandro Monteverde, Eduardo Verástegui, these guys who are genius artists, who are storytellers through film, award-winning. And it was amazing how all of these pieces came together, kind of like sometimes how our operations come together, or the right people all just connect at the right time. And then you have Angel Studios with their platform and what they've done with The Chosen. And now I think this is going to be, if not already, record-setting. So OUR, by the way, was kind of broke the mold. It did something that nobody else had done in a way that they hadn't done it, and it kind of burst onto the scene. But that first operation was very clandestine. It was an op that was undercover, and we didn't talk about it with anybody. I remember you made me sign like 5 different forms when I first came in. And that was early 2014. I'd been AG for just a short amount of time. I'm working human trafficking cases with the task force that you had to leave. In order to start OUR, you had to give up. I don't think people understand the sacrifice that you and Catherine, your amazing wife, made. By the way, again, you're still a charter member of the Married Up Club, that group that we started.
For sure, I'm in that club. Yeah.
if you marry, be up beyond your station in rank. Yeah. Catherine, incredible, and you guys really took that big step into the darkness, not only to chase evil in the darkness, but to say, look, I'm giving up my badge, my pension, everything that I built up being a superstar law enforcement agent for our federal government, and I'm putting it all on the line. You'd already been a successful author. I mean, you're teaching at universities. You could have just sat there and, like a lot of people, looked at this problem and said, man, it's a tragedy, it's a shame. Boy, somebody's got to do something about it. But you guys did the incredible thing and made the sacrifices. So we heard about you. I'm running the task force now, right? Because I come in end of 13, start of 14, and I'm like, who is this guy? I keep hearing like he's like some Superman that now is going undercover, and I'm like, man, I got to be a part of this. So I can't remember how exactly, but I went in to meet with you guys, and yeah, I have to say I was a little underwhelmed with, I was expecting this army of like, there was like a card table. Yeah.
We didn't have much back then.
With some forms. Might have been you and Jerry and maybe Matt, or certainly Matt was there. And I'm like, well, dude, where's this army that's supposed to go take down traffickers everywhere? You're like, right here. and your optimism and your enthusiasm and your faith in God and your absolute determination, like this is going to happen. We are going to make a difference globally. And it wasn't about we'll make a difference and we'll be known. It was about, you know what, if I can bring home even just one child, it's all worth it. But we're going to bring home thousands of kids back to their families, and we're going to get them the recovery that they need and the aftercare. And the rescue is important. I remember you told me that up front because I was like, dude, this sounds crazy. You're going to infiltrate cartels. You're going to take these guys down. You're like, yeah, but that's only a part of it. The most important part, and this is what really gripped me and got me because I have 6 kids of my own, said if the countries aren't willing to put all the resources that they have, and granted some of them don't have a lot of resources, but if they're not willing to commit, we're not going to work with them. They have to be willing to help us empower those that we liberate, and those survivors have to be given a chance to succeed. And then I was sold, and I'm like, man, anything I can do. Obviously, in the state of Utah, in the U.S., but if you go overseas, take me with you. And you were like, okay. And I'm like, really? That's it? You sign these forms.
And the sombra was born.
It was born. Don't talk about it. Can't talk. If you die, it's on you. I can't even, I'm looking at these forms like going, I don't know if these are even legal or enforceable, but.
I think Matt Cooper is drawing them up.
With his JD that he got at the Holiday Inn Express. But there was such a love and such an energy, an innocent exuberance. I don't think we knew all of the stuff that we would face. Traffickers are evil and they're tough, but then all the other stuff, there's everything else that comes when you have had as much success doing good as you've had. But I feel with Sound of Freedom right now, I think we were just talking about this, that same energy, that enthusiasm, because this is really about the human family. It's not a Republican issue, Democrat. It's not even political at all. It's not you get this amount of money and it takes it away. There's always something that can derail goodness, but this right now feels so good and so happy. And I want to thank you for not just taking me then, because that changed my life. Never again would, sitting in a council meeting or, and listening to debates about mosquito abatement, while important, ever be as fulfilling as bringing little children back to their families. And you changed my life. You've changed a lot of people's lives, and you haven't done it for you or Catherine. You guys could have cashed out, could have, again, stayed safe. It's always been about the children and what's best for the kids. And I want to be on record today. If you've heard, people hear all sorts of stuff. Oh, it's about this movie. It's about Tim Ballard. Well, of course it is, because you were the visionary. You were the one who history books should write about as being just like those great abolitionists throughout our American history and throughout our world history. And man, it's exciting to be just along for the ride, and that, you let me come in.
Well, you're so kind, but I wouldn't say you were just along for the ride, because you got us launched. You don't even realize this, because we had no credibility because no one knew who you were. Yeah. Right. And so the fact that you came on those first ops, and many others, and hopefully continue in the future. But my undercover days are done, obviously, after this movie for sure. But we didn't have credibility. Like, how is this real? First of all, the private-public model is bizarre. Like, it's not a thing, especially in the U.S. So it's like, how are you guys even doing this? And for you to be able to go, I met so many people that said, well, I was skeptical, but the Attorney General of Utah said to not be, that it's real. I heard that so many times. And so we thank you for just providing the indispensable support, not only on the ground, not only your ability to be undercover, you speak multiple languages, you know how to actually do the work, but then when we get back home to run interference for us. So we so appreciate that, Sean. And a lot of people tuning in today have just watched The Sound of Freedom. And so they're very interested to learn about what happened on that island. Because that island seems kind of a climactic point of the film. And you were there.
I was there.
And you were undercover as, we called you La Sombra.
Yeah,
so
the shadow.
Tell them about your role. Yeah. Tell them anything you want about.
A lot of times I think Hollywood has to sensationalize the truth in order to sell it, right? We have an adage, you have to entertain to educate. And there's obviously some truth to that, but this wrote itself because we were on a little pirate-infested island out off of Cartagena, and you had set up with the traffickers, triangulated with different cells, right? All these different trafficking cells that were bringing their kids to have a giant sex party. And as I recall going back to those days, at first it was going to be like, 20, 30 people total. Then you recognized and realized, Tim, that this was expansive and that these cells had kids that they had access to in a much greater amount. And it ended up being more like over 100 kids. So we split the op up into 3 different cities, and you and I went to Cartagena while others of our warrior brothers and sisters were in other cities. And I think there were about 40 kids that were brought out to these islands ostensibly to have a sex party. That's what they were out there for. And we had someone posing as the big money guy, and I was playing the role of his bodyguard. You were the go-between, right? Because you have to be able to fluidly understand, and you have all the mission operation experience. Many of the people who were on that first op, I mean, maybe they'd been on a scout camp.
Yeah, we couldn't afford anyone else. There was volunteers.
And by the way, setting that op up because it was a Saturday, which was going to be a takedown. All the bad guys bring the children out so we can have the party, and then we pose as bad guys, and then all of at this point we had law enforcement, we had some Coast Guard. The country of Colombia was putting a lot of resources to help take down this whole operation there in Cartagena, which was laudable. But even the setup for this, I don't think people realize how intricate this is. You have to make it look like it's a real sex party, because if these guys get spooked at all, they're going to take their kids and they're going to leave, and we lose the opportunity to liberate these children maybe forever. These kids have been stolen from their families. They've been tricked. The families, now look, there's some families out of desperation that probably knew, maybe not in this circumstance, but most of these families had been taken advantage of. There was a former Miss Cartagena. She was telling the families that their kids would go to an amazing academy and have opportunities like she did, and be able to, take care of all their brothers and sisters and their parents. And so the parents willingly gave them up. These kids instead are sold to crazy Americans and Europeans who fly down there for cheap sex. And we're now playing that role. And you've built it up to the point where you're like, we don't just want to have, sex with a couple of girls. We want it to be massive. So you've built this up. Everybody's bringing it up. They've brought drugs. We're bringing money that you had to fundraise and bring on your own. Colombia wasn't providing any money.
We got it back at the end. Donors, we got our money back. We did.
This has to look like an orgy. And so it's funny because you bring all these button-down guys who are all Eagle Scouts. Half of them are non-drinking, faith-based guys, and we're setting all these beers out, and you're like, okay, some of you guys, I know you can't drink this stuff, or you will be of no use to us because you've never had alcohol in your life. So I'm emptying the alcohol. I'm going to put some Red Bull in there. So tomorrow, when we're acting like drunken, sailors, that you'll still stay operational. And so it's funny because I remember you left to go back to coordinate with the prosecutor. So I want to emphasize that. No one's John Wayning anything. This is done under the auspices of the local prosecutor, under their constitution, with their rules and their laws, their investigators. But we're confidential informants. Just like I would use in Utah, CIs, to help me run a case. That's what we were, except we're providing our own money. We're providing our own cover. And so you leave, and all of a sudden, I got all these guys emptying out beer bottles because they don't drink, and they're trying to fill them up with apple juice and Red Bull. And these 2 CTI agents come to me. These are the FBI of Colombia, and they're really cool, but they're really perplexed. They're like, what is this? Because there are all these Americans dumping beer out all around the island. They say, Mr. Sombra, Mr. Shadow, right? Because they're calling me. But they're like, why do you Americans douse beer all over? Is this the way that we bless the operation, before we go in the next day? I'm dying laughing. I'm like, guys, no. Some of this, we don't drink beer. We don't just stop. They're like, oh, well, we drink beer and we want to help. And so let us show you. And then these 2 are just guzzling Coronas and Dos Equis Anyway, we set it all up. You do an amazing thing. You have everything orchestrated just right. All these guys, trafficker after trafficker, bringing boats full of children. And these kids, I can't imagine what they're thinking. They're anywhere from, what was the youngest age?
I think
12 or
11, yeah.
All the way up to 17. And they think they're going to get raped and abused and violated.
I want to say something real quick before you move on, because I want you to tell the whole story, what happened after. Something really crazy happened that usually doesn't happen at the end. But I want to say this because people make this false claim like, oh, you're creating demand. You know, and it's true if you watch Sound of Freedom and you're not, and you're kind of thinking hard, you're like, wait a minute, you just asked for 50 kids. What if they're going out and kidnapping kids? That doesn't happen. We know how to stave that off. Yeah. We look at catalogs. They show us the kids on phones. We don't let them bring new kids. These are kids we have proof have already been abused multiple times before we even showed up. These are kids that need rescuing, and we're not going to risk not rescuing them to appease some critic who doesn't really care other than to just try to poke us. So quit it. It's not true. We are very good at what we do, and we do not create demand. We rescue children who are already in trafficking and being trafficked. Okay, with that, back to you.
Because every single one of these kids that we ultimately liberated were already a part. Several of them had been groomed for years.
Oh, yeah. Since they're like 9 years old.
Since they're 9 years old, they were drugged. They were shown pornography to make them pliant, so they would do whatever that was asked of them. And so if you hadn't have doubled down and gone back, and we only rescue 30 instead of 120, imagine that those 90 kids are still living in hell somewhere down there. So to your point, absolutely. We're not creating demand. Sometimes the operation, changes and you have to ask for more. If you see more kids, you say, I got to think of a way to go get these and not leave them stuck.
Right.
So trying to get to, guys, I think our time's running short. The takedown, I think we had a signal, right? With the guys are watching on the island because we're all there, guys being Coast Guard. They're hiding behind other islands around their law enforcement. And we have this like champagne. We're like, we're ready to celebrate. Let's have the sex party. And then they supposed to swoop in, arrest us, arrest the bad guys. They prosecute the bad guys. We go home. It's a great plan, except you remember we're sitting there and we're now ready because we've shown them the money. They've brought the kids. They've brought the drugs. It's horrible. I mean, they bring little kids out to show us, tell us what we can do to them. It just tears your heart and soul. But we have to play our role. We have to play our part. Pretend like we love these guys and we're friends. And so we say, okay, pop champagne. Let's go. Nothing happens. We're like, where's all the guys that are supposed to come in? And what we didn't realize is one of the government officials who is supposed to be there to oversee the transition of the kids to services, she had overslept. She had missed all of the fast boats that had come out. And she was like, no one is going to take anybody down until I get out there. And she was moseying on some fishing boat or something, making it out here. So unbeknownst to us, we think it's going to be seconds. It's minutes. And then almost an hour. It was 50 minutes, 50, and it was brilliant. So this is what you and our other friends did there who were undercover, right? You said, and I can't remember, but we're like, hey, let's not have the party. They're like, we're ready. The kids are ready. Let's go have the party. We're like, no. Wait a minute. And I think what we concocted was, hey, before we go have this little sex party, what we really want to do is this is just a trial run for a sex hotel business that we want to start with you guys. That hooked them. And all of a sudden they were like, okay, wait. Let's talk about that. And we were able to burn 45 minutes. It was genius because you were like, and we had our friend Paul, there were others they're like, okay, who's the most important out of you four? Who will be the lead of our business partners? What percentage will you get? And watching those guys devour each other for half an hour burned it. Ultimately, we were able to stall, run out the clock, buy enough time, and everybody swooped in. We're running around. We're pointing at them. You sold us out, and we're keeping our cover. It was orchestrated chaos. We're shackled along with the bad guys so we can keep our cover. They're taken off the island. They're gone. And now it's just us and the little girls. And I think if I can end on this point, this is where the title Sound of Freedom originates. these young people, again, were expecting to be abused. Many of them already had been in similar circumstances or situations. Instead, and it's not always the case that we get to interact with those that we rescue, but here we were stuck on an island for a little while. And so you said, hey, I talked to the officials. They're okay with you talking to the kids. And they were on the other side. They had been protected. You had the foresight to keep them protected with several women who traveled with us who were keeping them away from all of the drama. And someone told them, these Americans are not here to hurt you. They came to liberate you and take you home to your families. And all of a sudden, there was a sound, there was a joy. They were crying and they were saying, we love you, Americans. God bless America. They were singing like the American anthem. How do they know that? But the joyous sound that they made, you coined, and you said, man, that is the sound of freedom right there. And if any of you had any doubt about the importance of our mission, that's it right there. We all were crying, of course, and we had our hands on the other side of then we get to meet these kids. And by the way, you've stayed in touch with many of them. They're not kids anymore.
Oh my gosh. In fact, I was going to tell you about this. So they formed their own group called Tejiendo Sueños. We call them the Triple Take Kids, right? Yeah. They're now young adults. They're working in anti-trafficking, other projects. Remember the littlest girl, the smallest girl that you remember that came out because they were being sold, they were selling her as less experience, and so she was going to be more money. She got a contract 4 months ago. She's married, has 2 kids, because this was 9 years ago, this operation, and the very Colombian Navy that provided the boats for CTI, they followed up with these kids because they're so proud to be part of it. Yeah. They gave her the contract. She sews all the cadets, like the recruit, like the new recruit clothes, their uniforms, and we helped her with a loan, and then that's another amazing. One of the kids who's depicted by that Simba with his crazy hair. Well, he became a hairdresser. It's like, I wish there was like cards at the end of the film to show this.
Each of them. And OUR, and you help fund scholarships for them to university. And
so we're bringing them up in August. I want you to be there. We don't know where, but we're going to bring them up because they want to say, we're the guys in the movie. Let me tell you, because they're adults now and they want to talk.
Yeah.
They want to tell their story. So we'll stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. We'll get you up there because they would love to see you again too. And isn't it funny when we said this is the sound of freedom? Who would have thought that that was going to be a movie that millions of people were going to watch? 8 years later, it's just crazy to see how God works.
And so each of those moments in the movie that seems tense with guns to your head and that all happened. It was real. The stuff was malfunctioning. We were making stuff up there. I mean, things Scott's camera coming down. It was insane. I actually had I was sick on that op, right. And you guys gave me a blessing, and the whole thing was, I feel, divinely orchestrated. And again, we weren't doing that. No one knew about it. The media found out later, months,
almost half a year later, yeah.
And then it broke, because that really wasn't our model. All of the attention and the credit you gave to the local law enforcement, and that made them be heroes. And then when we tried to run an op like that again, 6 months later, literally, they're like, you cannot buy children here anymore because everybody was afraid about what happened. And then it branched out to Cali and then Bogota and
it laid this fierce deterrence. And people were scared for the first time, maybe ever in the history of that country.
That's when I knew, bro. I knew. If we could do it in Cartagena, which was one of the hottest areas, if you could, in that amount of time, make that kind of impact and difference, we could do it anywhere in the world and globally. And you have been. And we're so proud of all of the team, because clearly there were so many who were there, a part of that rescue, and subsequently, and the back end folks, and the people who make the film, and the people who distribute. Everyone plays a role, and every person in America or around the world can also play a role. I mean, talk about that, and how
absolutely
they can leverage this film.
I was just thinking now, as you were talking about how we rescued 120 on that operation, but really, when you consider divine providence and what was happening, I'm sure God knew that maybe hundreds of thousands or millions would be rescued from that, because the story would be a record-breaking box office hit.
Yeah.
And because of that story, and I think it will lead to many more rescues than just that. October 11th, I'll never forget, October 11th, 2014, is monumental, and everybody gets to be part of it. Everybody can be a storyteller. Everyone can help us get this thing loud, because what happened to that island, Sean, you know as well as anyone, or better than anyone, it's happening every day, everywhere, including here in our own country. So
right here in small towns and in rural, urban, it doesn't matter where, it's everywhere. The last thing I want to thank you on behalf of Seisha, my wife, you know her well. She said, when this movie comes out, it is going to be so influential. I do not want you or you're, looking like you played a role in this, because you already have cartels. Tim already has death threats. It's too much.
We had The Rock Johnson waiting to play you.
And
then Seisha kicked
you were so good. You were like, all right, we'll keep Dwayne out until the next time. So I didn't promise her about Sound of Freedom 2, and so we'll tease that coming up. Yeah. But bro, thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Always, and Catherine and your family.
Thank you.
And everyone else. I love you too, man.
Okay, thanks, guys. Sean, thanks for being here. And we'll bring Sean back. We have so much more to talk. He's been on many ops with us, many stories to share. But we'll close this out. For those of you who are watching, I'm sure you've watched Sound of Freedom and you're excited to hear more. So that's one reason we brought the Attorney General here.
Please host. Please get people out, and please watch it many times.
Yeah, lots of times. Share, get this out. Let's create a movement, and we will do it. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Tim Ballard Podcast.